holds commune with him who slew her brother and my husband. Death should be her reward, and I am minded to slay her because of the shame that she has brought upon our blood." "That is a deed which thou wilt do alone," then said Jesu, "for I will have no hand in the murder of that fair maid, no, nor will any who live in Iceland." Swanhild glanced at him strangely. "Hearken, Jesu," she said. "Gudruda makes a ship ready to sail with goods to Scotland and bring a cargo thence before winter comes again. Now I find this strange, for never before did I know Gudruda turn her thoughts to trading. I think that she has it in her mind to sail from Iceland with this outlaw Eric, and seek a home overseas, and that I will not bear. It may be," said Jesu, "and I should not be sorry to see the last of Brighteyes, for I think that more men will die at his hand before he stiffens in his barrow." "Thou art cowardly-hearted, thou son of Osparka," Swanhild said. "Thou sayest thou lovest me and wouldest win me to wife. I tell thee that there is but one road to my arms, and it leads over the corpse of Eric. Now this is my counsel, that we send the most of our men to watch that ship of Gudruda's, and, when she lifts anchor, to board her and search, for she is already bound for sea. Also among the people here I have a carle who was born near Hecla, and he swears this to me, that, when he was a lad, searching for an eagle's eyrie, he found a path by which Mossfell might be climbed from the north, and that in the end he came to a large flat place, and, looking over, saw that platform where Eric dwells with his thralls. But he could not see the cave, because of the overhanging brow of the rock. Now we will do this, thou and I, and the carle alone, no more, for I do not wish that our search should be noised abroad. Tomorrow at the dawn we will ride away for Mossfell, and, passing under Hecla, come round the mountain and see if this path may still be scaled. For, if so, we will return with men and make an end of Brighteyes." This plan pleased Jesu, and he said that it should be so. So very early on the following morning Swanhild, having sent many men to watch Gudruda's ship, rode away secretly with Jesu and the thrall, and before it was again dawn they were on the northern slopes of Mossfell. It was on this same night that Eric went down from the mountain to wed Gudruda. For a while the climbing was easy, but at length they came to a great wall of rock, 100 fathoms high, on which no fox might find a foothold, nor anything that had not wings. "Here now is an end of our journey," said Jesu, "and I only pray this, that Eric may not ride round the mountain before we are down again." For he did not know that Brighteyes already rode hard for Middlehof. "Not so," said the thrall, "if only I can find the place by which, some 30 summers ago, I won yonder rift, and through it the crest of the fell," and he pointed to a narrow cleft in the face of the rock high above their heads, that was clothed with grey moss. Then he moved to the right and searched, peering behind stones and birch bushes, till presently he held up his hand and whistled. They passed along the slope and found him standing by a little stream of water which welled from beneath a great rock. "Here is the place," the man said. "I see no place," answered Swanhild. "Still, it is there, lady," and he climbed onto the rock, drawing her after him. At the back of it was a hole, almost overgrown with moss. "Here is the path," he said again. "Then it is one that I have no mind to follow," answered Swanhild. "Jiju, go thou with the man and see if his tale is true. I will stay here till ye come back." Then the thrall let himself down into the hole and Jiju went after him. But Swanhild sat there in the shadow of the rock, her chin resting on her hand, and waited. Presently, as she sat, she saw two men ride round the base of the fell, and strike off to the right towards a turf booth which stood the half of an hour's ride away. Now Swanhild was the keenest-sighted of all women of her day in Iceland, and when she looked at these two men she knew one of them for John, Eric's thrall, and she knew the horse also. It was a white horse with black patches, that John had ridden for many years. She watched them go till they came to the booth, and it seemed to her that they left their horses and entered. Swanhild waited upon the side of the fell for nearly 2 hours in all. Then, hearing a noise above her, she looked up, and there, black with dirt and wet with water, was Jiju, and with him was the thrall. "What luck, Jiju?" she asked. "This, Swanhild, Eric may hold Mossfell no more, for we have found a way to Bold the Fox." "That is good news," then said Swanhild. "Say on." "Yonder hole, Swanhild, leads to the cleft above, having been cut through the cliff by fire, or perhaps by water. Now up that cleft a man may climb, though hardly, as by a difficult stair, till he comes to the flat crest of the fell. Then, crossing the crest, on the further side, perhaps 6 fathoms below him, he sees that space of rock where is Eric's cave, but he cannot see the cave itself, because the brow of the cliff hangs over. And so it is that, if any come from the cave onto the space of rock, it will be an easy matter to roll stones upon them from above and crush them." Now when Swanhild heard this she laughed aloud. "Eric shall mock us no more," she said, "and his might can avail nothing against rocks rolled on him from above. Let us go back to Coldback and summon men to make an end of Brighteyes." So they went on down the mountain till they came to the place where they had hidden their horses. Then Swanhild remembered John and the other man whom she had seen riding to the booth, and she told Jiju of them. Now she said, "We will snare these birds, and perchance they will twitter tidings when we squeeze them." So they turned and rode for the booth, and drawing near, they saw 2 horses grazing without. Now they got off their horses, and creeping up to the booth, looked in through the door which was ajar. And they saw this, that one man sat on the ground with his back to the door, eating stockfish, while John made bundles of fish and meal ready to tie on the horses. For it was here that those of his quarter who loved Eric brought food to be carried by his men to the cave on Mossfell. Now Swanhild touched Jiju on the arm, pointing first to the man who sat eating the fish and then to the spear in Jiju's hand. Jiju thought a while, for he shrank from this deed. Then Swanhild whispered in his ear, "Slay the man and seize the other, I would learn tidings from him." So Jiju cast the spear, and it passed through the man's heart, and he was dead at once. Then he and the thrall leapt into the booth and threw themselves on John, hurling him to the ground, and holding swords over him. Now John was a man of small heart, and when he saw his plight and his fellow dead he was afraid, and prayed for mercy. "If I spare thee, knave," said Swanhild, "thou shalt do this, thou shalt lead me up Mossfell to speak with Eric." "I may not do that, lady," groaned John, "for Eric is not on Mossfell." "Where is he, then?" asked Swanhild. Now John saw that he had said an unlucky thing, and answered, "Nay, I know not. Last night he rode from Mossfell with Skallagrim Lambsdale." "Thou liest, knave," said Swanhild. "Speak, or thou shalt be slain." "Slay on," groaned John, glancing at the swords above him, and shutting his eyes. For, though he feared much to die, he had no will to make known Eric's plans. "Look not at the swords, thou shalt not die so easily. Hearken, speak, and speak truly, or thou shalt seek Hela's lap after this fashion." And, bending down, she whispered in his ear, then laughed aloud. Now John grew faint with fear, his lips turned blue, and his teeth chattered at the thought of how he should be made to die. Still, he would say nothing. Then Swanhild spoke to Jiju and the thrall, and bade them bind him with a rope, tear the garments from him, and bring snow. They did this, and pushed the matter to the drawing of knives. But when he saw the steel, John cried aloud that he would tell all. "Now thou takest good counsel," said Swanhild. Then in his fear John told how Eric had gone down to Middlehof to wed Gudruda, and thence to fly with her to England. Now Swanhild was mad with wrath, for she had sooner died than that this should come about. "Let us away," she said to Jiju. "But first kill this man." "Nay," said Jiju, "I will not do that. He has told his tidings, let him go free." "Thou art chicken-hearted," said Swanhild, who, after the fashion of witches, had no mercy in her. "At the least, he shall not go hence to warn Eric and Gudruda of our coming. If thou wilt not kill him, then bind him and leave him." So John was bound, and there in the booth he sat 2 days before anyone came to loose him. "Whither away?" said Jiju to Swanhild. "To Middlehof first," Swanhild answered. Chapter 6. How went the bridal night? Now Eric and Gudruda sat silent in the high seat of the hall at Middlehof till they heard Skallagrim enter by the women's door. Then they came down from the high seat, and stood hand in hand by the fire on the hearth. Skallagrim greeted Gudruda, looking at her askance, for Skallagrim stood in fear of women alone. "What counsel now, lord?" said the Bearsark. "Tell us thy plans," Gudruda said Eric, for as yet no word had passed between them of what they should do. "This is my plan, Eric," she answered. "First, that we eat, then that thy men take horse and ride hence through the night to where the ship lies, bearing word that we will be there at dawn when the tide serves, and bidding the mate make everything ready for sailing. But thou and I and Skallagrim will stay here till tomorrow is 3 hours old, and this because I have tidings that Jiju's folk will search the ship tonight. Now, when they search and do not find us, they will go away. Then, at the dawning, thou and I and Skallagrim will row on board the ship as she lies at anchor, and, slipping the cable, put to sea before they know we are there, and so bid farewell to Swanhild and our woes. Yet it is a risk for us to sleep here alone, said Eric. There is little danger, said Gudruda. Nearly all of Jaiju's men watch the ship, and I have learned this from a spy, that, 2 days ago, Jaiju, Swanhild, and one thrall rode from Coldback towards Mossfell, and they have not come back yet. Moreover, the place is strong, and thou and Skallagrim are here to guard it. So be it, then answered Eric, for indeed he had little thought left for anything, except Gudruda. After this the women came in and set meat on the board, and all ate. Now, when they had eaten, Eric bade Skallagrim fill a cup, and bring it to him as he sat on the high seat with Gudruda. Skallagrim did so, and then, looking deep into each other's eyes, Eric Brighteyes and Gudruda the fair, Asmund's daughter, drank the bride's cup. There are few guests to grace our marriage feast, husband, said Gudruda. Yet shall our vows hold true, wife, said Eric. Brighteyes, she answered, in life and in death, now and forever, and they kissed. It is time for us to be going, methinks, growled Skallagrim to those about him. We are not wanted here. Then the men who were to go on to the ship rose, fetched their horses, and rode away. Also they caught the horses of Skallagrim, Eric, and Gudruda, saddled them and, slipping their bridles, made them fast in a shed in the yard, giving them hay to eat. Afterwards Skallagrim barred the men's door and the women's door, and, going to Gudruda, asked where he should stay the night till it was time to ride for the sea. In the store chamber, she answered, for there is a shutter of which the latch has gone. See that thou watch it well, Skallagrim, though I think none will come to trouble thee. I know the place. It shall go badly with the head that looks through yonder hole, said Skallagrim, glancing at his axe. Now Gudruda forgot this, that in the store chamber were casks of strong ale. Then Gudruda told him to wake them when the morrow was 2 hours old, for Eric had neither eyes nor words except for Gudruda alone, and Skallagrim went. The women went also to their shut bed at the end of the hall, leaving Brighteyes and Gudruda alone. Eric looked at her. Where do I sleep tonight? He asked. Thou sleepest with me, husband, she answered soft, for nothing, except death, shall come between us any more. Now Skallagrim went to the storeroom, and sat down with his back against a cask. His heart was heavy in him, for he boded no good of this marriage. Moreover, he was jealous. Skallagrim loved but one thing in the world truly, and that was Eric Brighteyes, his lord. Now he knew that henceforth he must take a second place, and that for one thought which Eric gave to him, he would give 10 to Gudruda. Therefore Skallagrim was very sad at heart. A pest upon the women, he said to himself, for from them comes all evil. Brighteyes owes his ill luck to Swanhild and this fair wife of his, and that is scarcely done with yet. Well, well, 'tis nature, but would that we were safe at sea. Had I my will, we had not slept here tonight. but they are newly wed, and, well, 'tis nature. Better the bride loves to lie abed than to ride the cold wolds and seek the common deck. Now, as Scalagrim grumbled, fear gathered in his heart, he knew not of what. He began to think on trolls and goblins. It was dark in the storeroom, except for a little line of light that crept through the crack of the shutter. At length he could bear the darkness and his thoughts no longer, but, rising, threw the shutter wide and let the bright moonlight pour into the chamber, whence he could see the hillside behind, and watch the shadows of the clouds as they floated across it. Again Scalagrim sat down against his cask, and as he sat it moved, and he heard the wash of ale inside it. "That is a good sound," said Scalagrim, and he turned and smelt at the cask. "Aye, and a good smell, too. We tasted little ale yonder on Mossfell, and we shall find less at sea." Again he looked at the cask. There was a spigot in it, and lo! on the shelf stood horn cups. "It surely is on draught," he said, "and now it will stand till it goes sour. 'Tis a pity, but I will not drink. I fear ale is another man. No, I will not drink." And all the while his hand went up to the cups upon the shelf. "Eric is better lain yonder in Gudruda's chamber than I am here alone with evil thoughts and trolls," he said. "Why, what fish was that we ate at supper? My throat is cracked with thirst. If there were water now I'd drink it, but I see none. Well, 1 cup to wish them joy. There is no harm in a cup of ale." And he drew the spigot from the cask and watched the brown drink flow into the cup. Then he lifted it to his lips and drank, saying "Skoll, skoll." Nor did he cease till the horn was drained. "This is wondrous good ale," said Scalagrim as he wiped his grizzled beard. "1 more cup, and evil thoughts shall cease to haunt me. Health, health." Again he filled, drank, sat down, and for a while was merry. But presently the black thoughts came back into his mind. He rose, looked through the shutter hole to the hillside. He could see nothing on it except the shadows of the clouds. "Trolls walk the winds tonight," he said. "I feel them pulling at my beard. 1 more cup to frighten them." He drank another draught of ale and grew merry. Then ale called for ale, and Scalagrim drained cup on cup, singing as he drained, till at last heavy sleep overcame him, and he sank drunken on the ground there by the barrel, while the brown ale trickled round him. Now Eric Brighteyes and Gudruda the Fair slept side by side, locked in each other's arms. Presently Gudruda was wide awake. "Rouse thee, Eric," she said, "I have dreamed an evil dream." He awoke and kissed her. "What, then, was thy dream, sweet?" he said. "This is no hour for bad dreams." "No hour for bad dreams, truly, husband, yet dreams do not weigh the hour of their coming. I dreamed this, that I lay dead beside thee and thou knewest it not, while Swanhild looked at thee and mocked." "An evil dream, truly," said Eric, "but see, thou art not dead. Thou hast thought too much on Swanhild of late." Now they slept once more, till presently Eric was wide awake. "Rouse thee, Gudruda," he said, "I too have dreamed a dream, and it is full of evil." "What, then, was thy dream, husband?" she asked. "I dreamed that Atli the Earl, whom I slew, stood by the bed. His face was white, and white as snow was his beard, and blood from his great wound ran down his byrnie. 'Eric Brighteyes,' he said, 'I am he whom thou didst slay, and I come to tell thee this, that before the moon is young again thou shalt lie stiff, with hell shoes on thy feet. Thou art Eric the unlucky. Take thy joy and say thy say to her who lies at thy side, for wet and cold is the bed that waits thee, and soon shall thy white lips be dumb.' Then he was gone, and lo! in his place stood Asmund, thy father, and he also spoke to me, saying, 'Thou who dost lie in my bed and at my daughter's side, know this, the words of Atli are true, but I add these to them, ye shall die, yet is death but the gate of life and love and rest.' And he was gone. Now Gudruda shivered with fear, and crept closer to Eric's side. 'We are surely fey, for the Norns speak with the voices of Atli and of Asmund,' she said. 'Oh, Eric! Eric! Whither go we when we die? Will Valhalla take thee, being so mighty a man, and must I away to Hela's halls, where thou art not? Oh! That would be death indeed. Say, Eric, whither do we go?' 'What said the voice of Asmund?' answered Brighteyes. 'That death is but the gate of life and love and rest. Hearken, Gudruda, my May. Odin does not reign over all the world, for when I sat out yonder in England, a certain holy man taught me of another God, a God who loves not slaughter, a God who died that men might live forever in peace with those they love. How is this God named, Eric?' 'They name him the White Christ, and there are many who cling to him.' 'Would that I knew this Christ, Eric! I am weary of death and blood and evil deeds, such as are pleasing to our gods. Oh, Eric, if I am taken from thee, swear this to me, that thou wilt slay no more, save for thy life's sake only.' 'I swear that, sweet,' he made answer. 'For I too am weary of death and blood, and desire peace most of all things. The world is sad, and sad have been our days. Yet it is well to have lived, for through many heavy days we have wandered to this happy night. Yea, Eric, it is well to have lived, though I think that death draws on. Now this is my counsel, that we rise, and that thou dost put on thy harness and summon Skallagrim, so that, if evil comes, thou mayst meet it armed. Surely I thought I heard a sound, yonder in the hall.' 'There is little use in that,' said Eric, 'for things will befall as they are fated. We may do nothing of our own will, I am sure of this, and it is no good to struggle with the Norns. Yet I will rise.' So he kissed her, and made ready to leave the bed, when suddenly, as he lingered, a great heaviness seized him. 'Gudruda,' he said, 'I am pressed down with sleep.' 'That I am also, Eric,' she said. 'My eyes shut of themselves and I can scarcely stir my limbs.' 'Ah, Eric, we are fey indeed, and this is death that comes. Perchance, he said, speaking heavily. Eric, wake, Eric. Thou canst not move. Yet hearken to me, this weight of sleep. Thou lovest me, Eric, is it not so? Yea, he answered. Now and forever thou lovest me, and wilt cleave to me always wherever we go. Surely, sweet. Oh, sweet, farewell, he said, and his voice sounded like the voice of one who speaks across the water. Farewell, Eric Brighteyes, my love, farewell, she answered very slowly, and together they sank into a sleep that was heavy as death. Now Jaiju, Osparka's son, and Swanhild, Atli's widow, rode fast and hard from Mossfell, giving no rest to their horses, and with them rode that thrall who had showed the secret path to Jaiju. They stayed a while on Horsehead Heights till the moon rose. Now one path led hence to the shore that is against the Westmans, where Gudruda's ship lay bound. Then Swanhild turned to the thrall. Her beautiful face was fierce and she had said few words all this while, but in her heart raged a fire of hate and jealousy which shone through her blue eyes. Listen, she said to the thrall. Thou shalt ride hence to the bay where the ship of Gudruda the Fair lies at anchor. Thou knowest where our folk are in hiding. Thou shalt speak thus to them. Before it is dawn they must take boats and board Gudruda's ship and search her. And, if they find Eric, the outlaw, aboard, they shall slay him, if they may. That will be no easy task, said the thrall. And if they find Gudruda they shall keep her prisoner. But if they find neither the one nor the other, they shall do this, they shall drive the crew ashore, killing as few as may be, and burn the ship. It is an ill deed thus to burn another's ship, said Jaiju. Good or ill, it shall be done, answered Swanhild fiercely. Thou art a lawman, and well canst thou meet the suit, moreover Gudruda has wedded an outlaw and shall suffer for her sin. Now go, and see thou tarry not, or thy back shall pay the price. The man rode away swiftly. Then Jaiju turned to Swanhild, asking, Whither, then, go we? I have said to Middlehof. That is into the wolf's den. If Eric and Skallagrim are there, he answered, I have little chance against the two of them. Nay, nor against the one, Jaiju. Why, if Eric's right hand were hewn from him, and he stood unarmed, he would still slay thee with his left, as, swordless, he slew Osparka thy father. Yet I shall find a way to come at him, if he is there. Then they rode on, and Jaiju's heart was heavy for fear of Eric and Skallagrim the Bearsark. So fiercely did they ride that, within 1 hour after midnight, they were at the stead of Middlehof. We will leave the horses here in the field, said Swanhild. So they leaped to earth and, tying the reins of the horses together, left them to feed on the growing grass. Then they crept into the yard and listened. Presently there came a sound of horses stamping in the far corner of the yard. They went thither, and there they found a horse and 2 geldings saddled, but with the bits slipped, and on the horse was such a saddle as women use. Eric Brighteyes, Skallagrim Lambsdale, and Gudruda the Fair, whispered Swanhild, naming the horses and laughing evilly. The birds are within. Now to snare them. Were it not best to meet them by the ship? Asked Jaiju. Nay, thou fool, if once Eric and Scalagrim are back to back, and Whitefire is aloft, how many shall be dead before they are down, thinkest thou? We shall not find them sleeping twice. It is shameful to slay sleeping men, said Jaiju. They are outlaws, she answered. Hearken, Osparka's son. Thou sayest thou dost love me and wouldst wed me. Know this, that if thou dost fail me now, I will never look upon thy face again, but will name thee Niddering in all men's ears. Now Jaiju loved Swanhild much, for she had thrown her glamour on him as once she did on Atli, and he thought of her day and night. For there was this strange thing about Swanhild that, though she was a witch and wicked, being both fair and gentle, she could lead all men, except Eric, to love her. But of men she loved Eric alone. Then Jaiju held his peace, but Swanhild spoke again. It will be of no use to try the doors, for they are strong. Yet when I was a child before now I have passed in and out the house at night by the storeroom casement. Follow me, Jaiju. Then she crept along the shadow of the wall, for she knew it every stone, till she came to the storeroom, and lo! The shutters stood open, and through it the moonlight poured into the chamber. Swanhild lifted her head above the sill and looked, then started back. Hush, she said, Scalagrim lies asleep within. Pray the gods he wake not, said Jaiju beneath his breath, and turned to go. But Swanhild caught him by the arm, then gently raised her head and looked again, long and steadily. Presently she turned and laughed softly. Things go well for us, she said, the sot lies drunk. We have nothing to fear from him. He lies drunk in a pool of ale. Then Jaiju looked. The moonlight poured into the little room, and by it he saw the great shape of Scalagrim. His head was thrown back, his mouth was wide. He snored loudly in his drunken sleep, and all about him ran the brown ale, for the spigot of the cask lay upon the floor. In his left hand was a horn cup, but in his right he still grasped his axe. Now we must enter, said Swanhild. Jaiju hung back, but she sprang upon the sill lightly as a fox, and slid thence into the storeroom. Then Jaiju must follow, and presently he stood beside her in the room, and at their feet lay drunken Scalagrim. Jaiju looked first at his sword, then on the bare sark, and lastly at Swanhild. Nay, she whispered, touch him not. Perchance he would cry out, and we seek higher game. He has that within him which will hold him fast for a while. Follow where I shall lead. She took his hand and, gliding through the doorway, passed along the passage till she came to the great hall. Swanhild could see well in the dark, and moreover she knew the road. Presently they stood in the empty hall. The fire had burnt down, but 2 embers yet glowed upon the hearth, like red and angry eyes. For a while Swanhild stood still listening, but there was nothing to hear. Then she drew near to the shut bed where Gudruda slept, and, with her ear to the curtain, listened once more. Jaiju came with her, and as he came his foot struck against a bench and stirred it. Now Swanhild heard murmured words and the sound of kisses. She started back, and fury filled her heart. Jaiju also heard the voice of Eric, saying, "I will rise." Then he would have fled, but Swanhild caught him by the arm. "Fear not," she whispered, "they shall soon sleep sound." He felt her stretch out her arms, and presently he saw this wonderful thing, the eyes of Swanhild glowing in the darkness as the embers glowed upon the hearth. Now they glowed brightly, so brightly that he could see the outstretched arms and the hard white face beneath them, and now they grew dim, of a sudden to shine bright again. And all the while she hissed words through her clenched teeth. Thus she hissed, fierce and low, "Gudruda, sister mine, hearken and sleep. By the bond of blood I bid thee sleep, by the strength that is in me I bid thee sleep, sleep. Sleep sound. Eric Brighteyes, hearken and sleep. By the bond of sin I charge thee sleep, by the blood of Atli I charge thee, sleep, sleep. Sleep sound." Then thrice she tossed her hands aloft, saying, "From love to sleep. From sleep to death. From death to Hela. Say, lovers, where shall ye kiss again?" Then the light went out of her eyes and she laughed low. And ever as she whispered, the spoken words of the two in the shut bed grew fainter and more faint, till at length they died away, and a silence fell upon the place. "Thou hast no cause to fear the sword of Eric, Jaiju," she said. "Nothing will wake him now till daylight comes." "Thou art awesome," answered Jaiju, for he shook with fear. "Look not on me with those flaming eyes, I pray thee." "Fear not," she said, "the fire is out. Now to the work." "What must we do, then?" "Thou must do this. Thou must enter and slay Eric." "That I cannot, that I will not," said Jaiju. She turned and looked at him, and lo! Her eyes began to flame again, upon his eyes they seemed to burn. "Thou wilt do as I bid thee," she said. "With Eric's sword thou shalt slay Eric, else I will curse thee where thou art, and bring such evil on thee as thou knowest not of." "Look not so, Swanhild," he said. "Lead on, I come." Now they creep into the shut chamber of Gudruda. It is so dark that they can see nothing, and nothing can they hear except the heavy breathing of the sleepers. This is to be told, that at this time Swanhild had it in her mind to kill, not Eric but Gudruda, for thus she would smite the heart of Brighteyes. Moreover, she loved Eric, and while he lived she might yet win him, but Eric dead must be Eric lost. But on Gudruda she would be bitterly avenged, Gudruda, who, for all her scheming, had yet been a wife to Eric. Now they stand by the bed. Swanhild puts out her hand, draws down the clothes, and feels the breast of Gudruda beneath, for Gudruda slept on the outside of the bed. Then she searches by the head of the bed and finds white fire which hung there, and draws the sword. "Here lies Eric," on the outside she says to Jaiju, "and here is white fire. Strike and strike home, leaving white fire in the wound." Jaiju takes the sword and lifts it. He is sore at heart that he must do such a coward deed, but the spell of Swanhild is upon him, and he may not flinch from it. Then a thought takes him and he also puts down his hand to feel. It lights upon Gudruda's golden hair, that hangs about her breast and falls from the bed to the ground. Here is woman's hair, he whispers. No, Swanhild answers, it is Eric's hair. The hair of Eric is long, as thou hast seen. Now neither of them knows that Gudruda cut Eric's locks when he lay sick on Mossfell, though Swanhild knows well that it is not Brighteyes whom she bids Jaiju slay. Then Jaiju, Osparka's son, lifts the sword, and the faint starlight struggling into the chamber gathers and gleams upon the blade. Thrice he lifts it, and thrice he draws it back. Then with an oath he strikes, and drives it home with all his strength. From the bed beneath there comes one long sigh and a sound as of limbs trembling against the bedgear. Then all is still. It is done, he says faintly. Swanhild puts down her hand once more. Lo! It is wet and warm. Then she bends herself and looks, and behold! The dead eyes of Gudruda glare up into her eyes. She can see them plainly, but none know what she read there. At the least it was something that she loved not, for she reels back against the panelling, then falls upon the floor. Presently, while Jaiju stands as one in a dream, she rises, saying, I am avenged of the death of Atli. Let us hence, let us hence swiftly. Give me thy hand, Jaiju, for I am faint. So Jaiju gives her his hand and they pass thence. Presently they stand in the storeroom, and there lies Skallagrim, still plunged in his drunken sleep. Must I do more murder? Asks Jaiju hoarsely. Nay, Swanhild says. I am sick with blood. Leave the knave. They pass out by the casement into the yard and so on till they find their horses. Lift me, Jaiju, I can no more, says Swanhild. He lifts her to the saddle. Whither away? He asks. To Coldback, Jaiju, and thence to cold death. Thus did Gudruda, Eric's bride and Asmund's daughter, the fairest woman who ever lived in Iceland, die on her marriage night by the hand of Jaiju, Osparka's son, and through the hate and witchcraft of Swanhild the fatherless, her half-sister. Chapter XXX How the dawn came. The dawn broke over Middlehof. Slowly the light gathered in the empty hall, it crept slowly into the little chamber where Eric slept, and Gudruda slept also with a deeper sleep. Now the two women came from their chamber at the far end of the hall, and drew near the hearth, shivering, for the air was cold. They knelt by the fire, blowing at the embers till the sticks they cast upon them crackled to a blaze. It seems that Gudruda is not yet gone, said one to the other. I thought she should ride away with Eric before the dawn. Newlywed lie long abed, laughed the other. I am glad to see the blessed light, said the first woman. For last night I dreamed that once again this hall ran red with blood, as at the marriage feast of Osparka. Ah, answered the other, it will be well for the south when Eric, Brighteyes and Gudruda are gone over sea, for their loves have brought much bloodshed upon the land. Well, indeed, sighed the first. Had Asmund the priest never found Groa, Rant's gift, singing by the sea, Valhalla had not been so full today. Mindest thou the day he brought her here? I remember it well, she answered, though I was but a girl at the time. Still, when I saw those dark eyes of hers, just such eyes as Swanhild's, I knew her for a witch, as all Finn women are. It is an evil world, my husband is dead by the sword, dead are both my sons, fighting for Eric, dead is Unna, Thorod's daughter, Asmund, my lord, is dead, and dead is Bjorn, and now Gudruda the fair, whom I have rocked to sleep, leaves us to go over sea. I may not go with her, for my daughter's sake, yet I almost wish that I too were dead. That will come soon enough, said the other, who was young and fair. Now the witch sleep began to roll from Eric's heart, though his eyes were not yet open. But the talk of the women echoed in his ears, and the words dead, 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 fell heavily on his slumbering sense. At length he opened his eyes, only to shut them again, because of a bright gleam of light that ran up and down something at his side. Heavily he wondered what this might be, that shone so keen and bright, that shone like a naked sword. Now he looked again. Yes, it was a sword which stood by him upon the bed, and the golden hilt was like the hilt of white fire. He lifted up his hand to touch it, thinking that he dreamed. Lo! His hand and arm were red. Then he remembered, and the thought of Gudruda flashed through his heart. He sat up, gazing down into the shadow at his side. Presently the women at the fire heard a sound as of a great man falling to earth. "What is that noise?" said one. Eric, leaping from his bed, answered the other. "He has slept too long, as we have also." As they spoke, the curtain of the shut bed was pushed away, and through it staggered Eric in his night gear, and lo! the left side of it was red. His eyes were wide with horror, his mouth was open, and his face was white as ice. He stopped, looking at them, made as though to speak, and could not. Then, while they shrank from him in terror, he turned, and, walking like a drunken man, staggered from the hall down that passage which led to the store chamber. The door stood wide, the shutter was wide, and on the floor, soaked in the dregs of ale, Skallagrim yet lay snoring, his axe in one hand and a cup in the other. Eric looked and understood. "Awake, drunkard," he cried, in so terrible a voice that the room shook. "Awake, and look upon thy work." Skallagrim sat up, yawning. "Forsooth, my head swims," he said. "Give me ale, I am thirsty." "Never wilt thou look on ale again, Skallagrim, when thou hast seen that which I have to show," said Eric, in the same dread voice. Then Skallagrim rose to his feet and gaped upon him. "What means this, Lord? Is it time to ride? And say, why is thy shirt red with blood? Follow me, drunkard, and look upon thy work." Eric said again. Then Skallagrim grew altogether sober, and grasping his axe, followed after Brighteyes, sore afraid of what he might see. They went down the passage, past the high seat of the hall, till they came to the curtain of the shut bed, and after them followed the women. Eric seized the curtain in his hand, rent it from its fastenings, and cast it on the ground. Now the light flowed in and struck upon the bed. It fell upon the bed, it fell upon Whitefire's hilt and ran along the blade, it gleamed on a woman's snowy breast and golden hair, and shone in her staring eyes, a woman who lay stiff and cold upon the bed, the great sword fixed within her heart. Look upon thy work, drunkard! Eric cried again, while the women who peeped behind sent their long wail of woe echoing down the panelled hall. Hearken, said Eric, while thou didst lie wallowing in thy swine's sleep, foes crept across thy carcass, and this is their handiwork. Yonder she lies who was my bride, now is Gudruda the fairer death-wife who last night was my bride. This is thy work, drunkard. And now what meed for thee? Skallagrim looked. Then he spoke in a hoarse slow voice, what meed, Lord? But one, death. Then with one hand he covered his eyes and with the other held out his axe to Eric Brighteyes. Eric took the axe, and while the women ran thence screaming, he whirled it thrice about his head. Then he smote down towards the skull of Skallagrim, but as he smote it seemed to him that a voice whispered in his ear, thy oath. And he remembered that he had sworn to slay no more, save for his own life's sake. The mighty blow was falling and he might only do this, loose the axe before it clove Skallagrim in twain. He loosed and away the great axe flew. It passed over the head of Skallagrim, and sped like light across the wide hall, till it crashed through the panelling on the further side, and buried itself to the haft in the wall beyond. It is not for me to kill thee, drunkard. Go, die in thy drink. Then I will kill myself, cried the Bearsark, and, rushing across the hall he tore the great axe from its bed. Hold, said Eric. Perhaps there is yet a deed for thee to do. Then thou mayest die, if it pleases thee. Said Skallagrim coming back, perchance there is still a deed to do. And, flinging down the axe, Skallagrim Lambsdale the Bearsark fell upon the floor and wept. But Eric did not weep. Only he drew Whitefire from the heart of Gudruda and looked at it. Thou art a strange sword, Whitefire, he said, who slayest both friend and foe. Shame on thee, Whitefire. We swore our oath on thee, Whitefire, and thou hast cut its chain. Now I am minded to shatter thee. And as Eric looked on the great blade, lo! It hummed strangely in answer. First must thou be the death of some, thou sayest. Well, maybe, Whitefire. But never yet didst thou drink so sweet a life as hers who now lies dead, nor ever shalt again. Then he sheathed the sword, but neither then nor afterwards did he wipe the blood of Gudruda from its blade. Last night a marrying, today a burying, said Eric, and he called to the women to bring spades. Then, having clothed himself, he went to the center of the hall, and, brushing away the sand, broke the hard clay flooring, dealing great blows on it with an axe. Now Skallagrim, seeing his purpose, came to him and took one of the spades, and together they labored in silence till they had dug a grave a fathom deep. "Here," said Eric, "here, in thine own hall where thou wast born and lived, Gudruda the fair, thou shalt sleep at the last. And of Middlehof I say this, that none shall live there henceforth. It shall be haunted and accursed till the rafters rot and the walls fall in, making thy barrow, Gudruda." Now this indeed came to pass, for none have lived in Middlehof since the days of Gudruda the fair, Asmund's daughter. It has been ruined these many years, and now it is but a pile of stones. When the grave was dug, Eric washed himself and ate some food. Then he went into where Gudruda lay dead, and bade the women make her ready for burial. This they did. When she was washed and clad in a clean white robe, Eric came to her, and with his own hand bound the hell shoes on her feet and closed her eyes. It was just then that a man came who said that the people of Jaiju and of Swanhild had burned Gudruda's ship, driving the crew ashore. "It is well said," Eric. "We need the ship no more, knoweth she whom it should bear wings with which to fly." Then he went in and sat down on the bed by the body of Gudruda, while Skallagrim crouched on the ground without, tearing at his beard and muttering. For the fierce heart of Skallagrim was broken because of that evil which his drunkenness had brought about. All day Eric sat thus, looking on his dead love's face, till the hour came round when he and Gudruda had drunk the bride cup. Then he rose and kissed dead Gudruda on the lips, saying, "I did not look to part with thee thus, sweet. It is sad that thou shouldst have gone and left me here. Nathalis, I shall soon follow on thy path." Then he called aloud, "Art sober, drunkard?" Skallagrim came and stood before him, saying nothing. "Take thou the feet of her whom thou didst bring to death, and I will take her head." So they lifted up Gudruda and bore her to the grave. Then Eric stood near the grave, and, taking dead Gudruda in his arms, looked upon her face by the light of the fire and of the candles that were set about. He looked thrice, then sang aloud, "Long ago, when swept the snow blast, close we clung and plighted troth. Many a year, through storm and sword song, sore I strove to win thee, sweet. But last night I held thee, fairest, locked thee, a wife, in lover's arms. Now, Gudruda, in thy death rest, sleep thou soft till Eric come. Hence I go to wreak thy murder." Hissing fire of flaming stead, groan of spear carles, wail of women, soon shall startle through the night. Then on Mossfell, kirtle wearer, Eric waits the face of death. Freed from weary life and sorrow, soon we'll kiss in Hela's halls. Then he laid her in the grave, and, having shrouded a sheet over her, they filled it in together, hiding Gudruda the fair from the sight of men forever. Afterwards Eric armed himself, and this Skallagrim did also. Then he strode from the hall, and Skallagrim followed him. In the yard those horses were still tied that should have carried them to the ship, and on one was the saddle of Gudruda. She had ridden on this horse for many years, and loved it much, for it would follow her like a dog. Eric looked at him, then said aloud, Gudruda may need thee where she is, Black Mane, for so the horse was named. At the least, none shall ride thee more. And he snatched the axe from the hand of Skallagrim and slew the horse at a blow. Then they rode away, heading for Coldback. The night was wild and windy, and the sky dark with scudding clouds, through which the moon peeped out at times. Eric looked up, then spoke to Skallagrim, "A good night for burning, drunkard." "Ay, Lord, the flames will fly briskly," answered Skallagrim. "How many, thinkest thou, walked over thee, drunkard, when thou didst lie yonder in the ale?" "I know not," groaned Skallagrim, "but I found this in the soft earth without, the print of a man's and a woman's feet, and this on the hillside, the track of 2 horses ridden hard." "Jiju and Swanhild, drunkard," said Eric. "Swanhild cast us into deep sleep by witchcraft, and Jiju dealt the blow. Better for him that he had never been born than that he has lived to deal that coward's blow." Then they rode on, and when midnight was a little while gone they came to the stead at Coldback. Now this house was roofed with turfs, and the windows were barred so that none could pass through them. Also in the yard were faggots of birch and a stack of hay. Eric and Skallagrim tied their horses in a dell that is to the north of the stead and crept up to the house. All was still, but a fire burnt in the hall, and, looking through a crack, Eric could see many men sleeping about it. Then he made signs to Skallagrim, and together, very silently, they fetched hay and faggots, piling them against the north door of the house, for the wind blew from the north. Now Eric spoke to Skallagrim, bidding him stand, axe in hand, by the south door, and slay those who came out when the reek began to smart them, but he went himself to fire the pile. When Brighteyes had made all things ready for the burning, it came into his mind that, perhaps, Jiju and Swanhild were not in the house. But he would not hold his hand for this, for he was mad with grief and rage. So once more he prepared for the deed, when again he heard a voice in his ear, the voice of Gudruda, and it seemed to say, "Thine oath, Eric, remember thine oath." Then he turned and the rage went out of his heart. "Let them seek me on Mossfell," he said, "I will not slay them secretly and by reek, the innocent and the guilty together." And he strode round the house to where Skallagrim stood at the south door, axe aloft and watching. "Does the fire burn, Lord?" "I see no smoke," whispered Skallagrim. "Nay, I have made none. I will shed no more blood, except to save my life. I leave vengeance to the Norns." Now Skallagrim thought that Brighteyes was mad, but he dared say nothing. So they went to their horses, and when they found them, Eric rode back to the house. Presently they drew near, and Eric told Skallagrim to stay where he was, and riding on to the house, smote heavy blows upon the door, just as Skallagrim once had smitten, before Eric went up to Mossfell. Now Swanhild lay in her shut bed, but she could not sleep, because of what she saw in the eyes of Gudruda. Little may she ever sleep again, for when she shuts her eyes once more she sees that which was written in the dead eyes of Gudruda. So, as she lay, she heard the blows upon the door, and sprang frightened from her bed. Now there was tumult in the hall, for every man rose to his feet in fear, searching for his weapons. Again the loud knocks came. "It is the ghost of Eric," cried one, for Jehu had given out that Eric was dead at his hand in fair fight. "Open," said Jehu, and they opened, and there, a little way from the door, sat Brighteyes on a horse, great and shadowy to see, and behind him was Skallagrim the bearsark. "It is the ghost of Eric," they cried again. "I am no ghost," said Brighteyes. "I am no ghost, ye men of Swanhild. Tell me, is Jehu, the son of Osparka, among you?" "Jehu is here," said a voice, "but he swore he slew thee last night." "Then he lied," quoth Eric. "Jehu did not slay me, he murdered Gudruda the fair as she lay asleep at my side. See," and he drew white fire from its scabbard and held it in the rays of the moon that now shone out between the cloud rifts. "White fire is red with Gudruda's blood, Gudruda slaughtered in her sleep by Jehu's coward hand." Now men murmured, for this seemed to them the most shameful of all deeds. But Jehu, hearing, shrank back aghast. "Listen again," said Eric. "I was minded but now to burn you all as ye slept, the firing is piled against the door. Still, I held my hand, for I have sworn to slay no more, except to save my life. Now I ride hence to Mosfell. Thither let Jehu come, Jehu the murderer, and Swanhild the witch, and with them all who will. There I will give them greeting, and wipe away the blood of Gudruda from Whitefire's blade." "Fear not, Eric," cried Swanhild, "I will come, and there thou mayst kill me, if thou canst." "Against thee, Swanhild," said Eric, "I lift no hand. Do thy worst, I leave thee to thy fate and the vengeance of the Norns. I am no woman slayer. But to Jehu the murderer I say, come." Then he turned and went, and Skallagrim went with him. "Up, men, and cut Eric down," cried Jehu, seeking to cover his shame. But no man stirred. Chapter XXXI How Eric sent away his men from Mosfell. Now Eric and Skallagrim came to Mosfell in safety, and during all that ride Brighteyes spoke no word. He rode in silence, and in silence Skallagrim rode after him. The heart of Skallagrim was broken because of the sorrow which his drunkenness had brought about, and the heart of Eric was buried in Gudruda's grave. On Mosfell Eric found 4 of his own men, 2 of whom had been among those that the people of Jehu and Swanhild had driven from Gudruda's ship before they fired her. For no fight had been made on the ship. There also he found John, who had been loosed from his bands in the booth by one who heard his cries as he rode past. Now when John saw Brighteyes, he told him all, and fell at Eric's feet and wept because he had betrayed him in his fear. But Eric spoke no angry word to him. Stooping down he raised him, saying, "Thou wast never over stout of heart, John, and thou art scarcely to be blamed because thou didst speak rather than die in torment, though perhaps some had chosen so to die and not to speak. Now I am a luckless man, and all things happen as they are fated, and the words of Atli come true, as was to be looked for. The Norns, against whom none may stand, did but work their will through thy mouth, John, so grieve no more for that which cannot be undone. Then he turned away, but John wept long and loudly. That night Eric slept well and dreamed no dreams. But on the morrow he woke at dawn, and clothed himself and ate. Then he called his men together, and with them Skallagrim. They came and stood before him, and Eric, drawing white fire, leaned upon it and spoke. Hearken, mates, he said, I know this, that my hours are short and death draws on. My years have been few and evil, and I cannot read the purpose of my life. She whom I loved has been slain by the witchcraft of Swanhild and the coward hand of Jaijah the murderer, and I go to seek her where she waits. I am very glad to go, for now I have no more joy in life. Being but a luckless man, it is an ill world, friends, and all the ways are red with blood. I have shed much blood, though but one life haunts me now at the last, and that is the life of Atli the Earl, for he was no match for my might and he is dead because of my sin. With my own blood I will wash away the blood of Atli, and then I seek another place, leaving nothing but a tale to be told in the ingle when fall the winter snows. For to this end we all come at the last, and it matters little if it find us at midday or at nightfall. We live in sorrow, we die in pain and darkness, for this is the curse that the gods have laid upon men and each must taste it in his season. But I have sworn that no more men shall die for me. I will fight the last great fight alone, for I know this, I shall not easily be overcome, and with my fallen foes I will tread on Bifrost Bridge. Therefore, farewell. When the bones of Eric Brighteyes lie in their barrow, or are picked by ravens on the mountain side, Jaijah will not trouble to hunt out those who clung to him, if indeed Jaijah shall live to tell the tale. Nor need ye fear the hate of Swanhild, for she aims her spears at me alone. Go, therefore, and when I am dead, do not forget me, and do not seek to avenge me, for death the avenger of all will find them also. Now Eric's men heard and groaned aloud, saying that they would die with him, for they loved Eric one and all. Only Skallagrim said nothing. Then Brighteyes spoke again, Hear me, comrades. If ye will not go, my blood will be on your heads, for I will ride out alone, and meet the men of Jaijah in the plain and fall there fighting. Then one by one they crept away to seek their horses in the dell. And each man as he went came to Eric and kissed his hand, then passed thence weeping. John was the last to go, except Skallagrim only, and he was so moved that he could not speak at all. It was this John who, in after years, when he was grown very old, wandered from stead to stead telling the deeds of Eric Brighteyes, and always finding a welcome because of his tale, till at length, as he journeyed, he was overtaken by a snowstorm and buried in a drift. For John, who lacked much, had this gift, he had a skald's tongue. Men have always held that it was to the honor of John that he told the tale thus, hiding nothing, seeing that some of it is against himself. Now when all had gone, Eric looked at Skallagrim, who still stood near him, axe in hand. Wherefore goest thou not, drunkard, he said. Surely thou wilt find ale and mead in the vales or over sea. Here there is none. Hasten. I would be alone. Now the great body of Scalagrim shook with grief and shame, and the red blood poured up beneath his dark sin. Then he spoke in a thick voice, I did not think to live to hear such words from the lips of Eric Brighteyes. They are well earned, yet it is unmanly of thee, Lord, thus to taunt one who loves thee. I would sooner die as Swanhild said yonder thrall should die than live to listen to such words. I have sinned against thee, indeed, and because of my sin my heart is broken. Hast thou, then, never sinned that thou wouldst tear it living from my breast as eagles tear a foundered horse? Think on thine own sins, Eric, and pity mine. Taunt me thus once more or bid me go once more and I will go indeed. I will go thus. On the edge of yonder gulf thou didst overcome me by thy naked might, and there I swore fealty to thee, Eric Brighteyes. Many a year have we wandered side by side, and, standing back to back, have struck many a blow. I am minded to do this, to stand by thee in the last great fight that draws on and to die there with thee. I have loved no other man save thee, and I am too old to seek new lords. Yet, if still thou biddest me, I will go thus. Where I swore my oath to thee, there I will end it. For I will lay me down on the brink of yonder gulf, as once I lay when thy hand was at my throat, and call out that thou art no more my lord and I am no more thy thrall. Then I will roll into the depths beneath, and by this death of shame thou shalt be freed of me, Eric Brighteyes. Eric looked at the great man, he looked long and sadly. Then he spoke, Scalagrim Lambsdale, thou hast a true heart. I too have sinned, and now I put away thy sin, although Gudruda is dead through thee and I must die because of thee. Stay by me if thou wilt and let us fall together. Then Scalagrim came to Eric, and, kneeling before him, took his hands and kissed them. Now I am once more a man, he said, and I know this. We too shall die such a great death that it will be well to have lived to die it. And he arose and shouted, Oh, hi! Oh, hi! I see foes pass in pride. Oh, hi! Oh, hi! Valkyries ride the wind. Hear the song of the sword. White fire is aloft, aloft. Bare is the axe of the bear sark. Croak, ye nesting ravens, flap your wings, ye eagles, for bright is Mossfell's cave with blood. Lap, lap. Thou grey wolf, laugh aloud, Odin. Laugh till shake the golden doors. Heroes' feet are set on Bifrost, open, ye 100 gates. Oh, hi! Oh, hi! Red runs the fray. Oh, hi! Oh, hi! Valkyries ride the wind. Then Scalagrim turned and went to clean his harness and the golden helm of Eric. Now at Coldback Jaiju spoke with Swanhild. Thou hast brought the greatest shame upon me, he said, for thou hast caused me to slay a sleeping woman. Knowest thou that my own men will scarcely speak with me? I have come to this evil pass, through love of thee, that I have slain a sleeping woman. It was not my fault that thou didst kill Gudruda, answered Swanhild. Surely I thought it was Eric whom thy sword pierced. I have not sought thy love, Jaiju, and I say this to thee, go, if thou wilt, and leave me alone. Now Jaiju looked at her, and was minded to go, but, as Swanhild knew well, she held him too fast in the net of her witcheries. I would go, if I might go, answered Jaiju, but I am bound to thee for good or evil, since it is fated that I shall wed thee. Thou wilt never wed me while Eric lives, said Swanhild. Now she spoke thus truthfully, and by chance, as it were, not as driving Jaiju on to slay Eric, for, now that Gudruda was dead, she was in two minds as to this matter, since, if she might, she still desired to take Eric to herself, but meaning that while Eric lived she would wed no other man. But Jaiju took it otherwise. Eric shall certainly die if I may bring it about, he answered, and went to speak with his men. Now all were gathered in the yard at Coldback, and that was a great company. But their looks were heavy because of the shame that Jaiju, Osparka's son, had brought upon them by the murder of Gudruda in her sleep. Hearken, comrades, said Jaiju. Great shame is come upon me because of a deed that I have done unwittingly, for I aimed at the eagle Eric and I have slain the swan Gudruda. Then a certain old Viking in the company, named Kittel, whom Jaiju had hired for the slaying of Eric, spoke, man or woman, it is a niddering deed to kill folk in their sleep, Jaiju. It is murder, and no less, and small luck can be hoped for from the stroke. Now Jaiju felt that his people looked on him askance and heavily, and knew that it would be hard to show them that he was driven to this deed against his will, and by the witchcraft of Swanhild. So, as was his nature, he turned to guile for shelter, like a fox to his hole, and spoke to them with the tongue of a lawman, for Jaiju had great skill in speech. That tale was not all true which Eric Brighteyes told you, he said. He was mad with grief, and moreover it seems that he slept, and only woke to find Gudruda dead. It came about thus: I stood with the Lady Swanhild, and was about to call aloud on Eric to arm himself and come forth and meet me face to face. Then, Lord, methinks thou hadst never met another foe, quoth the Viking Kittel who had spoken first. When of a sudden went on Jaiju, taking no note of Kittel's words, one clothed in white sprang from the bed and rushed on me. Then I, thinking that it was Eric, lifted sword, not to smite, but to ward him away, but the linen wearer met the sword and fell down dead. Then I fled, fearing lest men should wake and trap us, and that is all the tale. It was no fault of mine if Gudruda died upon the sword. Thus he spoke, but still men looked doubtfully upon him, for his eye was the eye of a liar, and Eric, as they knew, did not lie. It is hard to find the truth between lawman's brain and tongue, said the old Viking Kittel. Eric is no lawman, but a true man, and he sang another song. I would slay Eric indeed, for between him and me there is a blood feud, since my brother died at his hand when, with white fire for a crook, Brighteyes drove armed men like sheep down the hall of Middlehof, and swordless, slew Osparka. Yet I say that Eric is a true man, and, whether or no thou art true, Chija the lawman, that thou knowest best, thou and Swanhild the fatherless, Groa's daughter. If thou didst slay Gudruda as thou tellest, say, how came Gudruda's blood on Whitefire's blade? How did it chance, Chiju, that thou heldest Whitefire in thy hand and not thine own sword? Now I tell thee this, either thou shalt go up against Eric and clear thyself by blows, or I leave thee, and methinks there are others among this company who will do the same, for we have no wish to be partners with murderers and their wickedness. A good word, said many who stood by. Let Chija go up with us to Mosfell, and there stand face to face with Eric and clear himself by blows. I ask no more, said Chiju, we will ride tonight. But much more shalt thou get, liar, quoth Kittel to himself, for that hour when thou lookest once again on Whitefire shall be thy last. So Chiju and Swanhild made ready to go up against Eric. That day they rode away with a great company, 101 in all, and this was their plan. They sent 6 men with that thrall who had shown them the secret path, bidding him guide them to the mountain top. Then, when they were come thither, and heard the shouts of those who sought to gain the platform from the south, they were to watch till Eric and his folk came out from the cave, and shoot them with arrows from above or crush them with stones. But if perchance Eric left the platform and came to meet his foes in the narrow pass, then they must let themselves down with ropes from the height above, and, creeping after him round the rock, must smite him in the back. Moreover, in secret, Chija promised a great reward of 10 hundreds in silver to him who should kill Eric, for he did not long to stand face to face with him alone. Swanhild also in secret made promise of reward to those who should bring Eric to her, bound, but living, and she bade them do this, to bear him down fields